Hello and welcome back to my channel. So today we shall be learning how to pad our bustier, and here I have my fabric cut out. For this tutorial I'll be using this foam padding. You can use hairstay or any interfacing of your choice. You can also use wording, so it totally depends on your preference. This one doesn't have gum at the back, so the first thing we are going to do is to place the center front pattern or fabric on the pad. So we are going to place it and then cut out. We are going to cut out exactly what you have on your fabric for this front pattern. Please note that your pad starts from your under bust. It shouldn't go below your under bust nor above your under bust. So that is where your foam padding should start. After cutting out, the next thing we are going to do is to come to the upper part of the bustier. We are going to come down by ½ inch. Now your pad or your foam shouldn't get to the upper part because you'll be turning this with your lining, so you don't need the foam to interfere while sewing. So you are going to come down by ½ inch from the upper part and then you cut it out. So after cutting out, this is what we have, and I will hold it down with pins. Remember, there is no gum on this particular foam padding. So the next thing we are going to do is to cut the second piece, which is the side. So I'm just going to pin it, and the first thing we are going to do is to cut out the midpoint, which is the part that has the cup shape, so that will be attaching to the center front. So I'm just going to cut out what I have there, and then we'll continue. To subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. So after cutting out, the next thing I'm going to do is to introduce my pattern. So I'm going to measure my bust radius. My bust radius is from the bust point to the under bust. Whatever value you have there is your bust radius. Please note, I can actually cut this directly on my fabric, but because this is a tutorial, I had to use the pattern to demonstrate. So from the bust point, you are going to come in by your bust radius. So for me, I have 3.5 inches as my bust radius. So I'm going to come in by 3.5 inches, and I'm going to add extra 0.75 inch. You can add ½ inch to it. The reason I'm adding this additional inches is because the bust is fuller by this side. So after adding that extra inches, we are going to connect from the upper part. We are going to connect from the upper part to the 0.75 inch which we extra that we added, and then to the under bust, just like I have done. That is what we are going to cut out. So I'm going to cut it out and we'll place it on our foam. A well padded bustier is not dependent on the type of interfacing you use, because for this I can use hairstay, I can use the soft wording, and it will still come out very fine. But how you contour your under bust and over bust, so you must know how to contour your under bust and over bust properly. That way any interfacing you use, your bustier is going to come out really fine. So now I'm going to place the pattern on my pad. I am going to come in by ½ inch for sewing allowance on the foam before placing my pattern to cut out, because I need seam allowance also on the pad, and the pattern does not have seam allowance. So I'm going to take note of my seam allowance, because there is already seam allowance added to my fashion fabric. So that seam allowance, I need to take note of it. So I'm just going to cut out exactly what I have on the pattern, taking note of the seam allowance for joining the curves. So after cutting out, this is what we have. Can you see the way it matches? I have 1 inch side seam allowance. So on the upper part, you are going to come down by half an inch, just like we did for the front. So this part doesn't interfere with your yoke or with your lining when turning. So at the side seam, I have half an inch, 1 inch seam allowance, and as you can see, my part didn't get to my side seam. So please take note of that also. So I'm going to cut out the second one because we have 2 pieces for the side front and then 1 piece for the center front. Also, while cutting out this, please take note of where the under bust is and which part goes to the over bust. Please, this is very important, so you don't interchange it. So this is it after cutting out. As you can see, the way it matches and it aligns very well. So I'm just going to bring the center front so we'll see what it looks like. So this is it. So because this doesn't have a gum, you can use your hair stay. Just cut tiny piece of hair stay and place on your fashion fabric the wrong side, and then take it to your ironing table using your steam iron to iron it together. So now to sew this up, you must take note of the underbust. The 2 underbusts must align, and you are sewing on half an inch or according to the seam allowance that you left. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew it and come back and show us what it looks like. After sewing, this is what I have. Can you see? So the next thing we are going to do is to trim out the excess foam on our seam allowance. Please do not trim on your fabric. So the reason we are trimming this is to reduce bulkiness at the bust area. So you're only trimming out the foam. You can notch before trimming, or you can trim later on your notch. But for here, I'm just going to trim out first before I notch. So after trimming out the foams, the next thing we are going to do is to notch. Take note of the under bust. You must notch the under bust. Now the essence of notching is for it to lay very flat, and when you iron it will come out really nice. So the next thing we are going to do is to give this a good press. So here I have my improvised tailor's ham. So I'm just going to place the seam area on it, and I'm going to open up my seam allowance and iron. Do not iron on a flat surface. So after ironing, this is what I have. Can you see how nice it's looking? This is really so beautiful. It's so fine, and the fit is very gorgeous. So please give this video a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe. You can also trim out the excess seam allowance at the inside. See you in our next one.